Alright, so I think that by this point, most people have come to accept the fact that Tulsi Gabbard is basically just a standard right-wing grifter at this point, and if you weren't there yet in terms of coming to grips with that, well, I got an amazing clip here that she posted on Twitter that is just absolutely hilarious for so many different reasons that we're going to get into here, but basically this is her like Dave Rubin style, why I left the left. She's saying she's no longer part of the Democratic Party. That's kind of news to me because I didn't think that she was still within the Democratic Party or associated with them in any way, so not exactly like a surprising announcement here to say the least, but I wanted to just run through this clip here with you guys, and I'm gonna have to commentate my way through it because there are just so many awesome things that she says in this, so let's just go ahead and start it off here.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness.
Okay, so, yeah, we already got a pause. Okay, so the driven by cowardly wokeness, you're gonna have to get more specific than that. I mean, this really just sounds like vapid, hollow virtue signaling and trying to throw red meat to a right-wing audience. That has really no meaning whatsoever. I mean, you could definitely critique some Democrats in terms of being too focused overly on, like, virtue signaling and, you know, doing the kneeling in the kente cloth like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer did during the Black Lives Matter movement. There's definitely a critique there in terms of them being, like, overly woke while simultaneously not actually delivering on material benefits to the people's lives who they are pretending to stand up for. There's definitely a critique there, but in terms of being like cowardly woke, I mean, I'm not even really sure what the fuck that actually means. Now, the better point that you made before that is that they're being run by an elitist cabal of warmongers, essentially. Okay, well, pause. First of all, sure, yeah, I would not disagree with that. The Democratic Party has been incredibly pro-war. They have been hawkish for basically the entirety of my lifetime. Barack Obama obviously significantly ramped up the drone war, you know, his actions in Libya as well. I mean, there's definitely, you know, we're talking about Joe Biden as the president right now, somebody who aggressively lobbied for the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, all of that, right? There's definitely a critique there from the left in terms of how the Democratic Party has been way too much pro-war throughout recent history and has been, you know, taking donations from the defense industry, the military industrial complex, etc. There's definitely an argument to be made there, but that's an argument that could be made from the left, not from the right. And so if the insinuation here is that Democrats are run by an elitist, you know, cabal of warmongers, well, you would also have to apply that same exact line of logic to the Republican Party to an even greater extent. I mean, we can look at the data on this right here from Open Secrets. I mean, you look at all of these major weapons manufacturers, these defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Tulsa, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Raytheon, etc. And if you actually look at the data, I mean, look at these lines here. They are disproportionately donating to Republicans. You can see it in this graph as well here. I mean, basically for the entirety of at least my lifetime, at least since the 90s, they have been consistently funding Republican campaigns more than Democratic campaigns, right? Now, obviously, again, this goes across party lines. This is part of the reason why I don't identify with either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, because I have an actual principled stance against these types of things. But you clearly don't have a principled stance against those types of things if you're only lobbying this criticism at the party or the coalition of people who actually take less money and less basically legalized bribes from the military-industrial complex. And this doesn't even get into, I mean, the pro-war sentiments that Republicans have had for, again, the entirety of modern American history. I mean, even going back, you know, since World War II, they have always been aggressively pro-war, right? I mean, you want to go back to the Reagan administration or the Nixon administration. And again, obviously this goes across party lines. Bill Clinton was incredibly pro-war. Barack Obama was incredibly pro-war. But, you know, it was George W. Bush who got us into Iraq and Afghanistan. It was Donald Trump who significantly ramped up the drone war even beyond what Obama was doing. I mean, you know, this is Donald Trump, somebody who assassinated a top Iranian general just out of the fucking blue for no justified reason whatsoever and almost popped off into World War III. I mean, like, these are not anti-war people. The idea that, like, Republicans are, by contrast to Democrats, somehow less pro-war is just completely delusional. It's completely ahistoric. But, I mean, Jesus Christ, we're only 11 seconds into this clip here, but so far just complete bullshit from Tulsi.
Who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war.
Okay, so I think that there's some critique there that, we're inching closer and closer towards nuclear war as, Russia is continuing their ongoing invasion of Ukraine, and there doesn't seem to be any push for diplomacy from either side of the aisle. So I think that's like one of the only critiques here that makes any legitimate sense whatsoever. But on the other ends of this, I mean, you're insinuating that like Democrats are controlled disproportionately by corporate elites. Well, I mean, go and look at the Republican Party's recent actions that they have been taking. I mean, first of all, just at a ground level, you go and look at plans that were put forward by guys like Rick Scott, guys like Mitch McConnell, any of the Republicans who are running for Senate right now. What's their agenda? I mean, it's basically in line with what Donald Trump did, right? Slashing taxes for the rich, gutting regulations in order to benefit corporate America. I mean, that's the entire Republican agenda. You can come out and scream about how you love small government and you want to just get rid of the bureaucratic red tape and all of that nonsense, but at the end of the day, all you are doing is serving the interests of the capitalist authoritarian private sector, okay, to the detriment of government programs that are in theory supposed to be working for the American people. So, I mean, the idea just at a fundamental level that it's, Democrats who are more in service of the elites, which they definitely are to a large extent, don't get me wrong, but as contrasted to Republicans, as if they're somehow pure, as if there's a single member of the Republican Party right now, or any conservative for that matter, that doesn't support an economic agenda that disproportionately benefits the elites. I mean, it's completely absurd and ridiculous. Now, the next point that she was making, in terms of Democrats racializing our politics today with their anti-white racism, whatever the fuck that means. I mean, we're talking about a Republican Party right now, a conservative movement that has been for decades essentially redistricting and gerrymandering within a lot of these state legislatures and these state districts explicitly along racial lines in order to disempower black people. Is that not like racialized politics? Is it not racialized politics when, as part of this anti-CRT movement, which Tulsi Gabbard also happened to get in on and made several appearances on Tucker Carlson to bash, but with this bullshit anti-CRT message. I mean, Republicans have been banning books by like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks across school districts in the United States. Is that not racialized politics when you're pretending like critical race theory and doing an analysis of the history of racism and how that's baked within our institutions and our economic foundations, that insinuating that that's some sort of like a woke Marxist attack against the existence of this country at all? Is that not racialized politics? No, that's neutral, I guess, in their view, which is also kind of funny because, a lot of these conservatives will bring up Martin Luther King Jr. and that famous quote that they always use in contexts like this, and they'll say, well, I just believe in what Martin Luther King Jr. believed, that people shouldn't be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, right? And by that, conservatives mean their interpretation of that quote completely taken out of context. They basically take that to mean, well, we should just put our blinders on and pretend as if racism and structural inequality between different groups within the United States doesn't exist. That's not what he fucking meant by that quote. The entire point that MLK was trying to make in that speech was that we don't have a country that is that way. We do not have a country where people are just judged by the content of their character, right? And part of the reason why MLK is such a beloved figure right now compared to how he was viewed back then, which was overwhelmingly negatively. I mean, a majority of white Americans thought that he was basically a domestic terrorist. The FBI considered him a domestic terror threat to the United States at the time as well. But he was also a democratic socialist, and that's something that Republicans, conservatives often overlook when it comes to like racial politics in the United States. And he was somebody who was aggressively pushing for higher wages and guaranteeing things like healthcare and fair wages to people at a fundamental level. So he was really a left-wing person, but they always cite him as if like his main message was that people should just shut up about race and pretend that it doesn't exist. Now, another thing there. So one of the most hilarious points that she was making, and is honestly my favorite part of that entire clip, is insinuating that Democrats are the party of attacking religious liberty. I mean, what are you even talking about? Matter of fact, I don't even think there is a single member of any of our major institutions in this country that are non-religious. I mean, could you guys think of a single Supreme Court member, even just throughout history, a single Supreme Court member, a single president, a single member of the House or the Senate who has been openly atheist or anti-theist and against religion? There hasn't been a single one, and there definitely isn't one right now within the Democratic Party. I mean, Joe Biden is religious, Nancy Pelosi is religious, Chuck Schumer is religious, they're all fucking religious. So it's like, what are you talking about? And this is coming at the same time where she has no critique for the openly theocratic Christian nationalist values that conservatives have been espousing recently, and making explicitly religious arguments when we're supposed to have separation of church and state, and making these types of arguments to justify things like their radical abortion bans, which have been absolutely catastrophic so so far. But, just as a point on that here from Politico, they say most Republicans support declaring the United States a Christian nation. And this even includes a majority of them support this even after they are made aware of the fact that this would be unconstitutional. They just don't even fucking care. You have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out and openly, proudly labeling themselves as Christian nationalists. I mean, this is where the Republican Party is. And you're insinuating that, it's anti-theist, it's against religious values, it's attacking religious people in this country because we're pushing back against their assault on abortion rights and women's bodily autonomy. I mean, what do you even mean by that? Attack on religious liberty? I mean, this is completely fucking absurd, especially as we've seen a religious onslaught from these Republicans all across the country. Now, another point that she was making there, well, one of the final things that I'll touch on here, the issue of the border, right? Pretending as if Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, that they openly support, an open border policy, and that they're just for, allowing anybody to come across the border willy-nilly with no processes, no regulations, nothing standing in their way in any way, shape, or form. Well, I mean, look at the data on this. The Texas Tribune, arrests along the U.S.-Mexico border top 2 million a year for the first time. Okay, so Joe Biden is not only not in favor of an open border policy, or even pushing aggressively for immigration reform, which is something that he should do to make it a much more streamlined process for legal immigration so that people aren't forced to go through dangerous and illegal avenues to get into this country. But not only is he not an open borders guy, he's been setting records in terms of the amount of people that he's been arresting at the border. So it's like she's just living in a completely delusional fantasy land. And I honestly can't even tell at this point if she genuinely believes what she was just outlining in that clip there. But just to give you a perspective in terms of why she's actually doing this, I mean, this is just a part of her grift, right? This is her taking her Dave Rubin arc to its final conclusion. So she posted this as well just a couple hours ago. She said, first show drops tomorrow, October 11th. You won't want to miss it. Subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Aloha. And she basically did a rundown showing all of these different clips and is advertising her podcast. So, I mean, there you go. There's the true motivation. She is out there trying to sell her podcast and try to make sure that she has a solid base of listeners. This is somebody who, I don't think should be taken seriously in any way, shape, or form. She's somebody who I might have agreed with a couple of years ago on some of her foreign policy takes and being somewhat of a marginally anti-war, at least in rhetoric, type of person back then. But at this point, I don't even know what the fuck to think about her because, again, I don't think that she genuinely believes everything that she was just saying. Because if she does, I mean, that just says a lot about her character and her intelligence to think that, Democrats are anti-religious. Democrats are for open borders. Democrats are, racializing our politics. Democrats are, disproportionately the more hawkish members of our Congress. I mean, it's just none of this. I mean, representing elites somehow more than conservatives. It's just all a delusional fantasy land that she is living in right now. And again, I mean, this is just a perfect demonstration of the fact that she is not somebody who has any legitimate principles or values underlying her politics. I mean, maybe she does, and she just did a complete 180 flip from a couple of years ago, but I honestly find that hard to believe. And so I'm more inclined to, insinuate that she is just a grifter at this point. And so, this is who Tulsi Gabbard is. I don't think anybody should really be surprised by this, but I mean, it's just an absolute fucking embarrassment.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying